Hello, everyone. It is Friday afternoon again out here on the West Coast. It's Friday evening over there on the East Coast. It could be late Friday in Europe, or it might even be Saturday, depending on where you live in the world. But no matter where you are, you know what time it is. It's time for Cinema Crusaders, that show where we look back on older movies, we break them down again, and we are always looking at movies that we think deserve a second look or have something interesting to talk about, and we love to talk about these different films. We're doing a little something different this month. What we're doing is a Cinema Crusaders version of 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but what we're doing is we're talking about movies that the previous movie featured an actor or an actress, and then we're going forward and looking at another one of the movies. So last time we talked about Mystery Men, and Geoffrey Rush was in that role playing Casanova Frankenstein. This time he is in a much different role. He is playing Spy Master to Elizabeth I, Sir Francis Walsingham. And this movie is also from the late 90s. So we're going to break that down in just a second. But before we do, I need to introduce my fellow Cinema Crusaders, those gentlemen I depend on for the great takes that you love to watch here on Cinema Crusaders. So first off, I'm going to introduce a man. He is a writer, a comic writer. He has also written short stories. I know he wants to write a novel someday. He is a great observer of all things pop culture. He does great articles for Comic Crusaders. He's also on the OCPN podcast for Omen Comics Podcast Network. I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Instead of a Dark Lord, you would have a queen.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't think of Cate Blanchett without thinking of that line. But yeah, I'm doing okay, and I'm kind of. This was a movie I had seen back in the day, but it had been a long time, and I forgot a lot. Coming back to it, I'm actually kind of appreciated a little more because I now start to see who was in this movie, first of all, because there were a number of people that I had forgotten, including the Ninth Doctor, which we'll get into. And also just like a lot of the subtle maneuverings that are kind of going on behind the scenes and all the political backstabbing and all the Game of Thrones style plays that we see in this movie. And I think it also quite well.
Yeah, we all know you love your Doctor Who, so don't mess with Steve and his Doctor Who. He is a Doctor Who encyclopedia over there. So, and then I want to introduce another man. He is a comic writer, a filmmaker. He's got a variety of films out there that you've seen on the indie circuit in a variety of different places, to include Waiting for Legros, The Unmentionables, an incredibly funny film. Let's see, I'm forgetting some, but it's Friday. My brain is already starting to shut down for the weekend. But you also have to remember he's got Comic Book, The Big Book of Bob, of Volume 1, that's out through Any One World. And you can buy Bob in its individual floppies as well. I have to tell you right now, Bob is one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. Bob, Non-Union Psychic. Go check it out. I'm talking about the man behind Warehouse 9 Pro, none other than Lance Lucero. How you doing, Lance?
Hey, how you doing? This movie fell off the radar for me pretty much. I remembered it was around. I remember its theatrical release. I remember all the imagery of it, but I had never ventured to watch it until you suggested it, and I'm interested in discussing primarily just the eye candy that it is. I mean, it is a great looking film. It is just top notch quality production.
Yeah, I really wanted to get into that with you, because we talk about film all the time, and this was obviously shot on film in the late 90s. But not only that, I mean, the costuming was fantastic. The lighting, I think, is fantastic. And I want you to talk about, I kind of want to hit on you to talk about the difficulties of filming and lighting with an open flame, because there's lots of scenes where dimly lit corridors with torches. And how are you going to capture that as a filmmaker? So I'm kind of want to pick your brain on that. But there's so much to get to in this movie. And as always, we're going to have to kind of, cut something short. And I want to get to the filmmaking process. We're going to do the actors because there's an ensemble cast. We're going to try and get through them fast because I think there are other parts that we should focus on with this, especially since this director didn't do a whole lot of Western movies. And I think he did a good job here for the most part. So So let's get into this real quick. So as we have talked about before with some other movies that are based on a true story or historical dramas and things like that, when you say historical, that is very loosely based on the history. We need to get out right off the bat that they have condensed quite a few events from Elizabeth's life that actually happened into a story that takes place within, I think probably the time frame is a couple of years. And, some of this stuff in reality happened to her much later in her reign. Some of this stuff is only rumored to have happened or maybe didn't happen at all. So you got some of that because we needed, of course, to have a love affair. We got some nudity, which we could talk about. I don't know if it was necessary, but I'm not going to say it's gratuitous because it sort of did fit what was going on, especially since one of the steamiest love scenes involves a pious Catholic man who wants to save England on behalf of the Catholic Church, getting it on with a woman who's not his wife. So take that for what you will. So
and then she backstabs him, which is great.
Yeah. So, but short story, real quick, if you don't know, Elizabeth I was the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and she was the second of the Boleyn girls that Henry VIII wed, or that wooed and had an affair with. And when his first wife, the Spanish and very Catholic Catherine of Aragon, couldn't give him a son and actually miscarried when Henry had an accident, he divorced her and then got rid of her. And she would later go on to die, but she wasn't executed. She died of natural causes, if you believe that.
Yeah.
So, and then he married Anne Boleyn, and she gave him a son. It was Anne Boleyn who miscarried. So she gave him a daughter, Elizabeth, and was pregnant with the son, and she's the one who miscarried. And right after she miscarried, he had her accused, most people think falsely, of treason, of having adulterous affairs, and had her beheaded. And then it goes and goes, and Henry VIII is that type of figure. So Elizabeth, at the beginning of this movie, is the Protestant daughter of Henry VIII, and her half-sister Mary is on the throne, and everybody wants Elizabeth executed because they don't want a Protestant on the throne. And if you know anything about the history of the Protestants and the Catholics over the years, especially in Europe, it's not a good one. It's bloody and violent and not very Christian. So we'll just leave that at that without getting into it. And so this movie is very much about Elizabeth coming to power, the political wranglings behind the scenes, the assassination attempts on her life, which did happen. There were various assassination attempts, and her in the middle of her court, her advisors, a very powerful spy master who is ruthless, and then France and Spain, who are determined to control England and keep it in its place. So that is I think that's a fairly brief but accurate summary of what the movie is about. It's very good in that way as a drama. Go check it out. Like I said, we don't have a ton of time because we like to keep the show to about an hour and 15 minutes. So I would suggest, unless anybody else has anything to add on the story that they thought was worth pointing out, we're going to move right into cast because we've got other stuff to cover later. So was that accurate, do you think, as far as summarizing the plot, though?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think it was a heck of a chore, screenplay-wise, to try and condense such a broad spectrum of characters into a two-hour film. That's sometimes where you have your faults because there are characters that kind of fall off the map, and you don't get not even a remotely bit of an arc to them. So it's you got to pick and choose in films like this. What characters you're going to combine, who you're going to kick out. Once again, it is cinema. It doesn't have to be historically accurate. That's docudrama that can belong to television or whatever. But in a sense, I think, some things suffered in the translation because some things fell off the map. And then some things were a little abrupt, like the introduction of John Gielgud and Daniel Craig. They just pop up late in the movie and they're another sinister force that's at hand. And then it's wrapped up rather crudely and it's over with. That segment could have just not have been in the film at all. But I get it. You got John Gielgud. So, he's got his day of shooting. You might as well put it into the film. So there are things like that can, I think, for your average audience, that might pull them out to say, well, that was random, and then it's over with, and then we move on. We get back to the main arc of the story. So I think that's something that has to be held, very, very sternly in screenplay writing, especially when it comes to a historical adaptation. You got to kind of figure out how you can just tell the story, and not what is maybe cool or who is fun to see or what characters you want to see. It's like, no, you got to get to the meat of the story and stick with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to go like into Daniel Craig's character, he was a Jesuit. I mean, that character was a Jesuit priest that was executed for conspiring against Queen Elizabeth. It was later in her reign. But you know what? He's a cool footnote, but I agree with you. You could have cut him out, and you still have major Catholic characters moving against her and conspiring. So.
Yeah.
Although I will say he looked like James Bond the entire time. You can see why all you had to do for a screen test was just show that footage of him walking towards Elizabeth like a badass. and that would have been like, yeah, he's James Bond at that point.
I do have to say, if they wanted to devote more screen time to that storyline and cut other stuff out, it would have worked. I mean, because in this time, there were a lot of Jesuit priests who were trained as warrior priest type things, and they were not pleasant people to be around. So, they were warriors of the faith, and, that is a whole other discussion. I don't want to get into all of the politics and everything with that. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think there was a lot they could have done. We also, there was some Hollywood in here. The supposed love affair between Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, and herself, that's rumored. And then the conflict between, and the way Walsingham wraps everything up, that happened over decades, and it wasn't all Walsingham, but, and we're going to get a little bit into this at director and everything, because Lance has some stuff to say about that, but it's like not exactly how it happened. And we will talk about whether it made for good filmmaking, because we had to have our love affair here and our love scenes and all that other stuff as well. So.
Yeah, this is not Oppenheimer. I mean, if you want like strict historical accuracy, you're probably not going to get it. But I mean, this is really one of those movies where they kind of take the framework of history and they make a gripping story out of it. You're kind of like riding the line between historical accuracy and like telling the story you want to tell. And in this particular case, they took more license than you would see on other films. But it'll work for what it is.
Real quick to wrap this section up, though, because I think we've had a good discussion already on this. I'm going to go around and ask you just yes or no in your opinion. Do you think they did a good enough job here that a viewer of this movie could get a flavor of what Elizabeth I was about and what this time frame was about in English history? So I'll go to Steve first and go to Lance. Do you think that's a yes, they did a good enough job that you can get a flavor of it, or no, it's just a movie to enjoy that's loosely based on history? So.
I think reasonably so. I mean, the thing is that they do tend to play around with the timelines of various things. And so, if you're kind of thinking that Elizabethan history is what you see in this movie, you may be disappointed in some aspects, and it doesn't give you a flavor of the whole reign. I mean, there's a whole second movie after this that deals with like the last 40 years of her reign, especially, the things that she's known for, like, the stopping of the Spanish Armada, and the pirates, of Sir Francis Drake, all that stuff. That's more handled in the Golden Age, and you completely missed that. She was a patron of the arts like Shakespeare and people like that. That's not in this. But in terms of what the early part of her reign was, what the time period and that period of life, the period of time was, it's not bad. It's just don't kind of take it too strictly.
Okay, that's fair. So what about you, Lance? What do you think? Does it give you good flavor? Or do you think it's just, for a good movie time? So
I think it's a good movie time. I mean, when I look at movies, especially in Europe at the time, and there's this glossy stereotype to the look. I mean, the look of this film is fantastic. It is top notch, absolutely. But to me, I think it's just the look of it can be a little bit misleading. I want to see the Monty Python version, the dirty, filthy, greasy-haired, bad teeth. Sometimes when you see the cast members come aboard, they all look like supermodels. They sometimes their hair is just too perfect, like they just came out of the salon. It's like, no, these dudes were greasy They'd use a dog as a napkin after they ate. They'd wipe their hands on them. That's kind of the thing that I think historically people need to see, and how we actually survived. I mean, how did we make it?
There was a version where I want to say Henry II with Peter O'Toole, where they actually do show that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I love that Monty Python version of what's it like in the day of a court. Is it so stuffy with perfect costumes and everybody looks like their hair's all clean and standing proper? No, man, people had smallpox and they rickets, and it was running rampant even in the court, because it was rumored the court was filthy. It was a dirty time.
Okay, that's the movie I was thinking of. Sorry.
What movie? Beckett?
Yeah,
Beckett.
Oh yeah, I like that movie.
So there are those aspects where I think of, here's the queen and she's supposed to be the beautiful, and she really wasn't. That she didn't bathe more than once, twice a year. There's a lot of fun things you can do in a period piece just to give people a flair of what life was like. And this is a movie that is like so glossed and so pristine that I think it loses a little bit of its faithfulness just on its look alone.
So you want that stank. So
yeah, it doesn't have to be, John Waters smell-o-vision, but it should be able to reek on screen.
Yeah. Now it's interesting you say that, because there are a couple of characters, specifically Kathy Burke, and we're going to get a little in the cast now, as Mary the First, who looks horrible. Her teeth are terrible. She looks unclean. She looks unwell. And she's also Catholic. So they don't shy away from making the Catholics look like crap, at least certain Catholics, and I'm not taking a shot at the film. I just thought it was an interesting choice.
I think you're right, because Daniel Craig was probably the greasiest of the dudes.
Yeah.
Everybody else looked pretty pristine, like they came out of the salon, but Daniel Craig, I bought him as a hard-working stiff, his hair was greasy, his skin was greasy. I bought that, and I thought, okay, that's something. But once again, I think it's too little, too late. But then again, we can get into the perspectives of an Indian director. What might have been the mindset, or what they think of how Europe was. I mean, is that taking a shot? Who knows? We don't know what's inside the mind of the person that's calling the shots.
Well, and to be honest, and to be fair, I think that if you're making a movie about Elizabeth I, and it's an English movie with an Indian director, it's coming from a certain perspective. And let's be honest, if you're looking at it from an English perspective, who are the villains in this film? It's the Catholic Church and those who supported the Catholic Church. So they're getting the black hat treatment. So it's like,
considering that India was for many years under the rule of the British Raj, and all the things that's going on, you get an interesting perspective from Shapur. And honestly, I don't think he really particularly likes any of them, and understandably so from his perspective.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, we were talking before we came on the air, and all of you rightly pointed out that no one really comes out looking great in this movie. I mean, in that sense, even though it looks beautiful, they didn't pull any punches on how ugly the whole scene was, and the politics, and how brutal the politics could be, and the wars. There's one particular scene where they send boys to go fight in Scotland, and they get absolutely destroyed, and they're all dead and being looted. And
sent by the bishops, by the way, because the bishops would not allow the men to fight. They sent children.
Yeah. So pretty damn good with portraying that kind of thing. So I do really want to get into this production value and everything. So I'm going to go around the horn real quick, and let's do one take and then see where we are time-wise. So I'm going to go to Lance first. Pick one or two actors, actresses that you'd like to talk about. We're kind of going to go through this, and then I really want to get into production and the look, the directing, and all that stuff, because this movie really deserves a fairly lengthy discussion on that. So yeah, let's do Lance first. So on parts of the cast, a couple parts of the cast we want to talk about. So
flat out, Vincent Castle, I thought just knocked it out of the ballpark. I mean, the moment he's on screen, he's still in every scene. And that whole French foppish thing is just fantastic. I mean, he nails it. He probably gets all the laughs in the movie, with his attitude and his posturing and his silliness. And I thought that was really, really fun. I mean, that was a heck of a treat, to see him take control even over the stodgy Elizabeth. I mean, he broke her barrier. And you could even see it, maybe even performance wise. It was what he was doing was a surprise, and it was fantastic. I really like him. I think he was the scene stealer in this film, absolutely. And then you look at Cate Blanchett alone. I mean, I'll say it, she's the Meryl Streep of our time. She just nails it. She nails it. That's it. She showed up and did that job perfectly, and you buy every bit of it. That's what you need, and she did it. Big shoes to fill performance-wise, and she did it, I think, perfectly. But still, I think Vincent Cassel just makes me smile when I think of his performance, and that is rare in a performance. So that's my bid right there.
I have to say that the moment he comes out from behind the curtains and he's in the dress and he looks at Elizabeth, he's like, so?
Yeah, it's like there was no shirking it. And his shock at not being, selected as a husband. Oh, good God. He's over it that quick. And it's like, let's get back to partying.
He's an asshole, and he enjoys being an asshole. And you just love this character, because he's so unapologetic about it and he's having a good time. And it's like, this guy's French. Yeah.
However, there was a scene later with real drama that he pulls off amazingly well, and it's when his aunt, Mary of Guise, is murdered by Walsingham, and they find her.
Yeah.
And he is despondent over her. And
acting.
And it's great. And I really had empathy for him in that moment, even though I don't like the character.
The relationship between him and the aunt was weird.
It was. But the emotions that he was conveying, the genuine grief that was coming across through the screen was fantastic. So
yeah. Even for a moment, there's a moment of shame, like when she's sprawled on the bed and he covers her. There's a moment of shame, and it's like, wow, that's acting. That is perfect. Is that scripted? Who knows? But it was there. Something bad happened, and he didn't want people to see it. So to me, that guy just nailed it. That's the dude you cast.
Yeah, and he goes, like you said, I think that's a great point that you bring up, is that he goes from being not the comic relief, but he's a comical type character who is great in stealing those scenes, to then that scene. I mean, talk about range and depth, and he doesn't have a huge part in the movie, but he contributes quite a bit to it. So it's very good. So over to Steve. So one or two, that you want to talk about in the cast. So.
Yeah, first one I want to talk about is James Frain, who plays the Spanish ambassador. I like bringing this guy up because he's somebody that I know from Count of Monte Cristo, the 2003 version, I believe it is, where he plays the corrupt French magistrate whose father is a Napoleonic sympathizer. This guy has a lot of range. He's a guy that you see in a lot of BBC productions. You see him in a lot of TV shows, minor roles in various films. I want to say he's been in things like Pride and Prejudice. He's been all over the place. But he's a very convincing Spaniard, and like they put him in olive makeup, and he actually looks fairly convincing. And he has a decent Spanish accent. Like he tries to put on a Castilian accent. It's not terrible. He is overdoing it a little bit, but it's not terrible. So I kind of appreciated that he kind of shows that he has that much range. And he always plays these very seedy, kind of like slimy characters that work their way in high society. And he does that very, very well. He did that very well here. He's a minor character. You get a really good moment opposite Dudley where he's trying to tempt him into working for the King of Spain. That whole temptation scene was really, really well played by him. Also by Joseph Fiennes as well. But I thought that was a really good moment. The other person I really want to bring in is Geoffrey Rush as Francis Walsingham. Because Walsingham is a guy who's a really interesting dude in historically. They do kind of overplay some of his accomplishments, for the sake of drama. But the way that Walsingham kind of plays it, he kind of does hone in on a couple of the key aspects of him. One is that he was a Protestant, and I want to say he was a Puritan. And so you kind of have this whole religious aspect to him, and you can kind of see that he's kind of out on the outside of the court and the Privy Council. They don't trust him with good reason. Nobody trusts him, and nobody should trust him. The guy's a spy master. But on the other hand, it's like he has this idea. He presents this pillar of faith and wisdom for Elizabeth when she needs it, and then on the other hand, he twists the knife and does so brilliantly. Particularly, I thought in his conversation with Mary of Guise, where he ultimately ends up killing her. That whole conversation is like, you can definitely tell, like, yeah, he's playing a game, and then it ends up being that the game is a complete double cross, where he uses the opportunity to try to kill her, while she thinks that she's bringing him in to try to turn him against Elizabeth, and he's the one person who's loyal. And the way that Rush plays this is very good. He's a complex historical figure, a complex character in this movie, and I think Rush hits the notes just right. And it's just kind of like why I thought, like, last week that he was a British actor, because he conveys that Britishness so well. No, he's Australian. So I mean, I just like that. He's just a chameleon. He's one of those really, really good actors in just about anything he's in, and I think that he plays every role very differently. And
I think he's the best skulker in the film too. I mean, all the guys are skulking in the darkness, and you have these low camera angles up to make him look taller and more sinister. But he was a little bit more overlit. They didn't cast shadows, the light wasn't overhead, making his eyes look sinister. It was just him. And I thought about the lighting. I was like, well, he's very well lit in this entire film for the spy master. You know what I mean? Yet everybody else is slinking in shadows and, trying to be a little more subdued. But no, he's right there. And I thought he's pretty good. Just standing there, hitting his mark and looking in the right direction. That's a great performance.
That's an interesting choice. So he's not the spy master in the shadows. He's right out in there in the light and menacing. So, so that's pretty crazy.
And you just see him walking around, but you can always tell that wherever he goes, he's got a purpose, and that's the way that Rush plays the mannerisms and the physical language of the character.
And it also goes once again to the point Lance makes often, which is charisma. Geoffrey Rush. I mean, there's charisma galore in this movie, but it's on screen. There's a presence that comes with Geoffrey Rush when he's on screen. There's a presence that comes with Richard Attenborough, Christopher Eccleston, and Cate Blanchett on screen. There's just a presence that comes with them. It can't define it. It's almost undefinable, but we know it when we see it.
Absolutely.
And it's
that
there.
it factor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will also say I don't believe Rush or Walsingham was a Puritan. In fact, Puritanism would be just as subjugated during this time as Catholicism, which ultimately led to the Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower and them coming over here.
Yeah, he did practice a form of Catholicism that was not popular though. But I will check.
That wouldn't surprise me. So I mean, there were all sorts of things going on at this time and different things. In fact, doing some research for this film, I was surprised that Martin Luther encouraged Henry VIII to become Protestant, saying that polygamy was allowed in the Bible under Protestantism, and so he encouraged Henry VIII to just take another wife and become Protestant. So, and that was Martin Luther saying that, which shocked the hell out of me. So I was like, wow. So, once you start reading history, it's like it's very interesting. I mean, in and of itself, that's fascinating. For me, I'm going to go a little bit different direction. I've got three, but one is just real quick. I have to mention that the French ambassador was a former English footballer, a soccer player named Eric Cantona. He played for Leeds United, Manchester United, a number of others. One of his most famous moments is actually kung fu kicking a fan over the top into the grandstand because the guy spit on him during a game. Is pretty amazing. But this guy played the French ambassador in this movie. I think this is his first major acting role, and I think he's serviceable in the movie. I don't think that it's the greatest acting performance ever. He didn't get He got some more acting performances after this. Obviously, French is his first language, not English. But I thought he did a pretty good job. But I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, especially since it was odd to me as I watched this film the first time, and I knew who Cantona was, that here we are with Blanchett and all of these great actors, and then the part of the French ambassador, which is not a small role, is an English footballer. So I thought that was strange.
He must have had a great agent, because how does that happen?
Yeah. And it's not like there was a lack of, in the late 90s, a lack of French actors who could speak English as well, who could have pulled it off.
Absolutely.
There were quite a few. So it was a odd choice. I thought he was serviceable as it. I thought he had some good moments. I thought he had some moments where he looked weak in his ability to deliver lines and everything. So I thought it was a mixed bag performance, but it wasn't so bad that it destroyed the film at all. I think I can say that. Right. So,
I mean, come on, you, in a sense, you kind of set a guy up for failure when he has to go up against these heavy hitters. It's almost like, why would you do that?
especially since he's the one, most of his scenes are him being the straight man to, and I forget his name now. I'm forgetting it. But the actor we were talking about before who plays Anjou,
Oh, so Vincent Castle.
Yeah, Vincent Castle. He's the straight man, the French ambassador to Vincent Castle's over-the-top decadent Frenchman. So you want somebody who can pull that off. And I can think of that. Who is the guy who plays the Algerian man but he's Algerian born, but he plays a Frenchman in the first Mission Impossible movie. He could have been great as a French ambassador. So
right. But once again, he had to share scenes with Richard Attenborough and Cate Blanchett. I mean, that is, you got a camera sitting in front of you. You got a crew of 200 people. You got the heaviest hitters on the planet. That does something to people, and you got to make sure that that's out of their mind. You're there to act it, and. There are moments where I can see he's out of his element. This is not fair.
He's not on the football pitch anymore. So.
Right, that's different.
There are people that come in that were relatively new in this film, and they do hold their own decently. They get better afterwards, but they hold their own decently. That guy, it's like, I'm in over my head, but I'm going to do the best I can.
Yeah.
And like I said. There were some moments when I thought he did a very professional, serviceable job, and there were moments where he looked out of his place, So, but not horribly so. Like I would be like, oh God, he was the worst thing ever,
Right.
I also want to bring up Kathy Burke as Queen Mary I. Now, I think she did a great. Once again, a small part. I think she does a great job portraying mania, portraying desperateness. She looked filthy and dirty in this movie, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, she looks like the kind of person, if you saw her on the street, you'd be like, oh God, get away from me. It's just like, And then at the end, I thought she did a wonderful job of conveying the struggle in her to want to execute her half-sister, and then she does it. And this is a historical question that's out there for historians. Many people don't understand why Mary I did not have Elizabeth executed. And Norfolk is begging her in the movie to have her executed, and she does it, which is the whole reason we had another Elizabeth the Queen, and we have a Protestant, England to this day instead of a Catholic one. I mean, there were Catholics ready to be elevated to the throne if Elizabeth had been executed. It didn't happen. And I thought her small parts did a great job. So I think Kathy Burke was very, very good in this movie.
Yep, top notch.
I liked her scene with Cate Blanchett very early on. I mean, it's dramatized and completely invented for the movie, but at least they come up with an explanation for maybe why she doesn't do that. That little bit of bond of sisterhood, even though she might have hated Elizabeth's mother. The fact that there is something between, in them that is the same. There are their father's daughters, and she just can't bring herself to do it. For this movie, that works.
Yeah, I agree. And for all we know, that's why she didn't do it. I mean, it's kind of lost to history at this point. But I thought that came across very well. And I thought Kathy Burke was great in the character, bringing her to life. The other one I'm going to bring up, Steve's going to love this, is Christopher Eccleston as Norfolk. I think Christopher Eccleston is fantastic in this film. I don't know a whole heck of a lot about the Duke of Norfolk at this time. I also have to say that Jamie Foreman as the Earl of Sussex is fantastic as well, the two of them. But Norfolk comes off as the most powerful man in England at the time. And he has a menace and a swagger and a hubris and an arrogance about him that just radiates off him. Once again, it's that charisma. And then to see him brought down low, you're just like, I mean, even if the people bringing him down aren't good people, you can't help but be a little bit happy that this arrogant, I'm going to say it, arrogant prick is taking the fall,
Right.
And I like the way he goes off too, and the way that Walsingham basically said, "Yeah, history's going to forget you," and they do.
And
history does forget him.
Yeah, and not only that, but he was sincere. I truly believe that yes, ambition was part of it, and greed was part of it. But I also believe, like a lot of these people, they were complex characters, and I do believe there was an aspect of sincerity in his belief that he thought he was protecting the church. Now, was it their primary motivation? Probably not.
I like the way they show it to you just with the severed heads at the end. I mean, the others, they look like they're begging for to be spared, and they're beheaded. There's a defiant look in Eccleston's head when it's displayed. Like, he went down the way that he lived. I mean, he might have been a horrible bastard, but man, I respect that.
And I have to say, I don't know for sure, but that may even be acting there too, because I'm sure that's an alginate head that they took from him putting on a scowl or something, as they took the plaster, mold of his head and did that. I also have to say the Earl of Sussex was captured while he's taking a deuce in the bathroom. I mean, that's ugly and nasty, and they showed it. So I did appreciate that.
That's a cheap move, though, man. In any historical era person, that's the most cheap ass move ever,
isn't it? I mean, it's like, talk about
Walsingham pulls no punches in this movie. Like, he is absolutely dirty.
It reminds me of Porky's. What time does so and so go to the bathroom? Okay, we'll just wait. You know what I mean? And with a Beulah the Ballbuster or whatever.
Norfolk's lover against him. I mean, she was the one who gave him the letter.
I have to say there one final thing, and then we're going to get into production, and we're going to start by talking about the look of this film, and I'm going to go to Lance first on that. There is one particular scene where Dudley, who's supposedly in love with Elizabeth, is having sex with one of her maids, and she dies a rather horrible death, and it's something that I haven't seen on camera before, where the dress was poisoned. They don't show it. They show her in the throes of being poisoned, and then they show her dead. So they don't show her death, but I thought it was pretty powerful. I thought that was pretty powerful storytelling, and I don't know. I don't think that's true. I've never heard of that being true, but just looking at it, it feels true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's cinema. I'm not exactly sure it's true, considering that they wore their clothes day in, day out, and never washed them. So all of a sudden, this pristine dress is poisoned. It's a little Hollywood to me, but it worked cinematically.
Yeah.
I don't think the two things happened at the same time. I think if she had an affair with Dudley, it probably had nothing to do with the time when she was poisoned and wearing the dress. I think there may have been some truth to it, but I think they probably, wove it together, because they thought it was artful to, mix sex and death. Something like that.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And really, if we're talking about cinema, if we're talking about a movie, if it feels true, then that's almost as good as being true, to be honest with you, when we're talking about a movie like this. It's like, okay, as long as you're not going out there and then talking about history and saying that this movie is that actually happened in history. No, it didn't. But
right. Bottom line, none of us were there. We don't know. It's a reenactment. So I always remind people it's always a reenactment. None of us were there. We really don't know. There's 1,000 different perspectives. So just leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into this film. And I want to get into the look of the film itself first off. And I'm going to go to Lance first, but I want to talk about the filming. I want to talk about the lighting. I want to talk about the costuming. And there is a ton of stuff to cover here. Like you said, it's a beautiful film. So I'm going to start with Lance, and then I'm going to go to Steve, and then I'm going to, let's have a discussion about this because, once again, the movie was absolutely beautiful. So we need to talk about what they did here to accomplish that. So over to you, Lance.
They had the best of the best. at that time, the costumes absolutely top notch. Hair, makeup, sets, even the environments, location shooting, top notch. I mean, this is what I expect from a period piece, not just green screen and locked in a studio. This is what I expect.
Not only that, an A tier, a top tier period piece. So it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are things here that could only be done in a big budget film. It would be very difficult to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't do a lot of this stuff with the a tiny budget. There was investment in this, and it shows on screen. I mean, it is absolutely top notch. And I, looking at the cameras, yeah, they're Aeroflex cameras, the best spherical lenses on the planet. You're getting the best of the best image wise. So one of the other things that I was looking at was the film stock, the 500T, and it just says they used 500T, and which is tungsten. And I'm like, well, didn't they use any daylight film? Because there was a lot of exterior shots, and I'm not sure, because the color palettes and the color tones seem to match from exterior to interior, which means if you're using a tungsten balanced film, you need to have a tungsten balanced filter on your camera. An 85 filter is what it's called. So
I'll be right back, guys. My wife just hurt herself, so I got to go help her.
All right, jump in there.
Yeah, keep talking. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So the thing is I'm looking at the color palettes and I'm wondering, wow, did they do absolute tungsten balanced film throughout the entire production, which is rare? Usually you're mixing and matching with daylight and tungsten. So I'm not sure if that's an error in the Internet Movie Database technical description. Maybe it takes more research, but I'm a little confused by that. Although the color palettes seem to be matchable. I could be wrong. Now, I myself have done that, shot entirely tungsten balanced film, even exteriors, and your color palette does look a little different. So I'm wondering about that. That's a question mark for me. That's something worth going down a rabbit hole, technically. Now, using these tungsten balanced films, you get more saturation. You get just way more color. It's more in depth. This is something you cannot capture with video. You just cannot do it. It's impossible. So a film like this lends to that. The costumes, the hair, the makeup, that just puts a whole different spin on everything. So photography wise, I think it was top notch. Directorial aspects of it, I question certain things. He does a little bit of a George Roy Hill thing where he's shooting through curtains, or he's shooting through metal grates and wooden grates, and I'm always thinking, you got performers there. Maybe you start off with that and you cut inside, but they're performing. Do not shield your performers. You can do that for artistic sake, but let's go in there and see your performer. So that, to me, takes away from the production and the performances. Nobody wants to see a curtain flowing in front of a person's face for an entire scene. That's not cool. Go inside or open it up. Do something to enhance it. So those little weird things kind of suck me out. And he was a big fan of these wide, high angle shots looking down for some reason, which were a little bit jarring in the editing process, if you ask me. Someone enters the room and it's a big, gigantic shot and it's the top of their head. And then you cut 2 close-ups. It's like, well, I get it, maybe trying to create a geography, but in some cases, don't go for the cool shot. Go for the shot that enhances the performance.
Now, I have a question for you on that, because I got the feeling he's trying to capture the scope of the rooms, of the halls and stuff like that. But how could you have done that better, do you think, to capture that feel that he's going for, but without the problems that you're talking about?
Well, I think obviously you're hoisting a camera, you're getting the light ray, you're doing everything just for somebody entering a room. And I'm thinking, well, does that show the geography? I think it shows the geography better if you show the entire room, somebody entering, and you already have a subject there. Because that way, when you come into the room and you create that master shot, you can automatically start cutting into close-ups, and it's symmetrical. It's like when we were talking about Mystery Men, and I was like, wow, it's so jarring at times You know, when boom, there's a canted angle, and then it goes back to a stagnant, and then all of a sudden it's handheld. It's like, no. You need to create the symmetry. Otherwise, it's difficult for the editor, and sometimes it's a little bit trying on the storytelling. And audiences, they don't know the technology, and they're not supposed to. But if it sucks them out of the movie just for that second, you failed. You don't want that to happen. So I think there's an aspect of don't go overboard. And because they had all this grand stuff in this film, I thought there was a little bit of going overboard in some of the directorial shots in the film. I'm thinking, nah, a lot of that wasn't needed, man. That's not the meat of the story. We got it. We know what it looks like. You can have done that better. And then everybody that's sinister has a low angle shot. It's stereotypical. The low angle shot, they're looking big and tall and sinister. It's like at times, you know what, a close-up works just as good. You know, if they're a great performer, why go through all that trouble? But, you know, those are directorial stances. Those are directorial preferences. I get it. They got to tell a story. They're trying to enhance production value. But if the production value is already there, I always think scale that stuff back. Just tell the story. Just be John Huston. Tell the story. You don't need those styles. You don't need to try to make your mark. Just tell the story.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's top notch. The movie's top notch.
Cool, fair. I'm going to go to Steve next, and then I got a couple questions for both of you. So, Steve, what did you think?
Yeah, in terms of the set design, I got a very Bollywood flavor from it. Like, it's very much an Indian director with a history working in Bollywood as an actor and as a director, I believe.
Especially the court scenes where they're having parties and stuff. There are a lot of curtains and drapes and all sorts of stuff like that. So
I mean, it's hard to kind of pin down, but if you kind of just look at like just the designs of the castle, of the palace and the interior, I mean, you definitely get a sense that the way the colors are set up, the way that some of the props are arranged, it does have a feel of like something that you would see in an Indian film. The scenes, you know, with the curtains flying over, whatnot, especially during some of the more the sex scenes and whatnot, they feel like something, the kind of love scenes you would see in a Bollywood production. You know, the way that, you know, because there's a dance almost to it. You know, something that you would see there. So I can definitely see the Indian influence in it, but it's never overpowering. That's the thing. I mean, it is very much a movie about Queen Elizabeth's life. It is very much a movie about Renaissance era England, and you know they get enough of that, but it's just more like the way that it's framed, the way the directorial camera is working, the props that are used, you know, certain amounts of the costume design. You can definitely tell that this is an Indian director, you know, who is looking at it through the lens of someone, you know, from that part of the world. And I don't think that that's necessarily bad at all. I think it's interesting. I think it's visually interesting, particularly if you're not really used to that kind of approach.
I will also add that there is a scene on the river where there's a bunch of boats. Now, I don't know how historically accurate that is. I'm sure they did boating, but the feel of the interiors felt Bollywood. You know, there were lots of cushions and stuff. And maybe that's period accurate. I really don't know enough about Elizabethan interior design to tell you if that's true or not. But if it has that feel to it. So I can see where you're saying that. Now, I have a couple questions for both of you. And I'm going to go to Lance first. And then, Steve, I want your opinion on how they pulled it off. But one of the things that impressed me here, and I'm kind of curious what your take is that there are a number of scenes, especially in the Tower of London, where it is a dark interior that is lit with actual flame torches. And nowadays, they couldn't do that on video. They would have to go back and touch it up digitally. And sometimes they would just add digital flames and light it that way because you get a lot of distortion and flare and stuff on video with open flame. How does that kind of stuff handled on film, filming on open flame, and how you getting the lighting right? Because I'm sure you still have to have some lighting, but you want to really convey this dark interior with most of the things being illuminated with the flame. So,
yeah, I can't. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would think. I mean, we have faster film speeds today. Even then, that will help. there is reflective light, and there's probably a light off screen with a gel that somebody's wiggling, something just to give it that extra highlight, because fire itself doesn't throw off a lot of light. It needs help, and that's always up to the set designers. They got it. That's playing it safe. And I usually think that a lot of times they're all gas valved. There's gas running through them so they can start them and stop them.
So you're saying it's really an illusion. So we're getting the illusion that it's being lit by the flame.
You're getting the illusion of fire. Yes, it needs help. It's not exclusively just a flame, because you'd have to put a person's face pretty close to the flame to get it illuminated the way you want. So it is movie magic. It's great production value. It's lighting, it's camera, it's lenses, it's everything to help enhance that look.
Okay. So Steve, then I'm going to go to you as a viewer of the film, as I was. How did you think? How effective were they? How effective were they with that illusion? Because to me, it's utterly believable. And now hearing what Lance saying, to me, it's true. But when I watched it, I was like, okay, they're lighting it with the flame, which was fantastic to me. So what did you think about those interior scenes and the Tower of London stuff? So,
yeah, I thought that they looked credible coming in. And yeah, I mean, I kind of looking at it, you can kind of tell, yeah, they put a lot of work into putting the lights in the right places. I mean, I can't imagine how many hours of, people putting lights in, and then, putting in the movie magic, as Lance is saying here, setting up the illusion and, maybe playing with the light a little bit. I mean, who knows? They might be using mirrors. I mean, I don't know how they do it. But I will say, like, the right parts of the scenes are dark to give you that illusion of darkness, and the right parts are lit to show you the important things in the scene, which are the actors and what they're doing and any important props, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing process. So they could have a stand-in standing there for hours, days, lighting that perfectly before the performers come out on the set. And the old joke is, why shouldn't a director of photography smoke? Because it'll take him too long to light a cigarette. You know what I mean? It can get ridiculous. And even being there, me saying, what's the exposure? Well, I don't think I should shoot it because I only have a 2. Well, the film speed, according to its direction, will capture the image perfectly. We're shooting. Well, I refuse to shoot. I don't think it's going to be lit well enough. Well, then you're fired, because the specs say it's going to be okay, and we're not breaking any new ground. All right, let's shoot it and see what happens. Oh my God, it looks fantastic. It's like, yes. You rely on the tools that are there and the specs that are given you, and you're gonna be okay. But understand, it still needs a little bit of help. So that movie magic aspect of it, that's cinema. And video, you're right. It could be blown out. You would have no resolution in the fire. It just doesn't look good. But film, it'll capture it and it'll look great.
Yeah, and I brought up the Tower of London scenes, but the illusion of natural light and light by fire is consistent throughout the entire movie. I mean, so there are scenes where there's a hidden chapel in a movie with the priest and 2 people in there, and it's lit by candlelight. I'm sure there are lights there, but it looks like it's lit by the candles, even though now we know it wasn't. There are scenes all throughout the entire movie where that feel is captured very, very well. And that's one of the things that struck me as the most beautiful about the movie, is that it brought me into that illusion that I was watching. I was a person, glimpsing these people's lives during this time frame. It didn't take me out of that illusion. So I appreciated that. I also wanted to talk to both of you, and I'm going to go to Steve first, then go to Lance. What did you think of the, to me, deliberate choice to portray the castle in a certain light, and it's grim? Sometimes it's very oppressive. Sometimes it's enclosed. Versus when Elizabeth is out in the countryside, it's open, it's free. I feel like elves are going to frolic through the meadows and stuff like that. It's like, here's this idyllic existence out in the countryside, which not true from everything that I've read, but there it was. And then you get into London and it's a nest of vipers, So what did you think about that, Steve? Then I'll go to you, Lance. So
yeah, they're definitely using the environment for imagery to kind of make a thematic point. They're trying to start off in Elizabeth in a place of innocence, trying to show, oh, she was, this innocent princess in a tower, and it's really the exposure, to the corruption at court that takes a darker turn and transforms her. Because they're definitely trying to make a point, that love doesn't survive politics with this movie. You definitely can see that because everything that that she found happy, in her old life ends up getting tarnished and destroyed, particularly her relationship with Dudley. So they are definitely trying to contrast, this countryside, which is, it's kind of like Snow White, sort of dancing with the animals and whatnot, trying to kind of make that point. And yeah, I don't think that countryside England was necessarily like that. I have seen some of it. It's not, always as beautiful as they make it look. There are nice rolling hills in some places, but it doesn't always look like that. And so, but I mean, I will say the castles and whatnot, that looked believable. They definitely used, I don't know if they used real castles for it, or if they just use really good, models or whatnot. But I mean, that contrast was definitely shown.
And before I go to Lance, I will say that whoever did the location scouting for that particular meadow with the trees surrounding everything did a fantastic job. And that's part of the production process as well. And I don't know if that tower was actually there, if that's a set that they built, but it looks like the place that I'd love to retire to, So over to you, Lance. What do you think about how they did that and how the director presented that, so you really have that contrast? So
I think once again, it's the cinema aspect of it, and like Steve said, it's very Bollywood-esque. I mean, all those colors, all the light fabrics, the bright sun, the warmth, and from what I understand, it's dreary there. It's overcast. Those days are few and far between, and I would have preferred to see what it really looked like. I would have preferred to see the dreariness, but happiness within the dreariness. Still they lived. They were still outside. I think that was a little bit too, like Steve said, it was a little too Snow White. It was a little too, Cinderella kind of dancing through there. Okay, I get what you're after, but really, I want the dreary. I want the heavy fabrics. Like in the interiors, from what I saw a lot of light fabrics. From what I understand, tapestries, curtains, you had to keep those dank castles warm. You know what I mean? I would think that I would have spilled water down the sides because of the condensation to reflect light. When people walk in the room, I would like to see dust fly off the doors. You know what I mean? I wanted, come on now. It ain't like today. They weren't running a vacuum every day there. I mean, it was a dirty. I wanted to see dirt on the bottom of the dresses when they're scraping along the ground. I mean, this is all the stuff that I want to see in a period piece, but never see unless it's a Monty Python movie.
Now I want Lance's pirate movie, because I want to see the pirate movie with the full stank, and some guy with a festering wound that he's had for 3 years because he can't get it treated, but he's too ornery to die. So
right. I mean, and that's what the English and French court happened to be. I mean, they were using their own rooms as toilets. I mean, it was bad. And to me, that's also comical. I want to see that chamber pot steaming in the background. You know what I mean? I think that's fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. The last thing I want to get to now, one of the things I think is worth noting here is that this movie holds your attention, but there's no huge action pieces. In fact, there really are. There's one action set in here, and it's an assassination attempt, and it's not really a whole lot of action in it. So they really focus on the drama and the acting in this movie. And part of that, though, is the props. And I thought this was worthy of talking about separately, because that's another piece of the movie making process. I'm going to go to Lance first, but what did you think of the prop work on this film? I will start off and say, personally, I thought the props were really, really good. I thought the weapons looked period accurate that when they had them in the different places. I thought the musical instruments were absolutely fantastic. The costuming we've already talked about, all of that I think looked really good. And I know that's an important part to you as well. So what did you think of their prop work here?
I was convinced. I don't know the fashions exactly, but just looking at the belts and how even Joseph Fiennes had his sword, and I thought that was cool. And then he had a little dagger on the side. I'm like, those are full blown props. Those look great. Even the silly hats with the feathers. I'm like, wow, that's pretty neat. The fashion accessories, which really struck me.
The one that really got me, and I'm going to go back to, but one that really got me is at the end when the soldiers are all grabbing their halberds. A lot of times people want to make halberds look too fancy and not as a serviceable weapon.
It was stock. It was just the stock weapon that they issued because it just needed to be functional. It didn't need to be ornate. And I know that shot you're talking about. And I thought it was neat when they're pulling them off the racks and when they're taking them off the wooden. Just get it. You're a soldier, dude. Grab your weapon and get out there and do that. And, I thought that was neat. The glimpses that I got of the soldier armor, I really wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see a little bit more, but I think it washed even the fabric underneath, that the padding that they had to put underneath and place the armor above. I thought, well, that's pretty neat. I like those details. And I think, of course, they nailed it 100%. And to the point where we never know that when they're sitting at a table, whether or not they're wearing their gym shorts or not. But so long as they had every other prop there, that's all that matters. The tables, for all we know, stuff is balsa wood in there, paper mache. It's all movie magic. And when it comes together like that, people think it might be a real castle. And I guess that's what you want them to think, even though you can probably go right up to the wall and punch a hole in it because it's paper.
And I will say that even the guards in their uniforms, like the guards when she's under house arrest in her, idyllic castle out in the countryside, they look like actual guards. So they're all in uniform, but they're not overly ornate or fancy because nobody could afford to put all of their guards or soldiers in overly ornate or fancy stuff. It's serviceable, and that's
even when the in Scotland when they had the close up of the dying kid, and she uses her own scarf. To wipe the blood off of him. I mean, it's a beautifully ornate, handmade scarf. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be something that looks like you bought at the mall. And then you see it later with blood, a little bit more of a close up, and it's thrown on the ground and it's heavy. It's like that's a real piece of wardrobe prop. That's an accessory, and that worked perfectly. Those little details, those are the fun things too. When I see stuff like that, I'm like, hey, that's, those people are up all night preparing that entertainment for us. They're working hard to play that off, and that's when you respect it. That's when you say this is fun.
And as I go to Steve, I mean, I really want to hear what Steve has to say, but I think that was part of the great magic of this movie is that they capture you, and bring you into that illusion for a couple hours. So, which is always a good, even if it's a fictitious illusion, it's a version of what we're seeing. So. Over to you, Steve. What did you think about the prop work? Anything that really stood out for you? Stuff that you really liked? For instance, and I'll bring this up real quick. There's a scene where they try to assassinate Elizabeth, and a crossbow bolt thuds into the boat, and it has a visceral thud to it, and that thing looks nasty and serviceable and thick, and it looks like if you got hit by with that, you're in some serious trouble. So I mean, even that little detail, and it's for like a 2-second shot. Feels real. So over to you.
Yeah, I did like that. I thought that the prop work and the prop designs and all that looked really, really good. And I will say about that scene, I kind of like how they really don't show a lot of violence at all. They just show a lot of chaos. The camera kind of flies in a bunch of different places, so you don't really have a sense of what's going on. Kind of like if you're in that moment and everything kind of turns into chaos. Everything is, beautiful and pristine and idyllic for one moment, and the next minute it's just complete anarchy. It's just completely nuts, and I like that. The weight of the crossbow bolt really works. I love the costumes that the pikemen were wearing towards the end because I did like they have the ruffled shirts and whatnot, but I mean I really like the way that the capes were like a darker red. Than you're kind of expected to see, or than you see like on a lot of the design that you sort of see of these kinds of things. It's a very subdued red with a darker blue, and I kind of felt like that really worked. The way that the cape kind of draped over, and it's kind of like a half cape. I thought that was just a really, really great design. There are Bollywood elements also to the way that some of the costumes are, but when it works, it really works. I thought that Walsingham looked really good. The way that his headdress is set up, it does look like a lot of what Walsingham actually looked like in the pictures that we have of him. So that really kind of worked, particularly in the way Geoffrey Rush is kind of framed in them, with the beard and the short hair. All that really works. He's unlike everybody else in there, he's set apart because he just wears that black frock. And I think that sets him, both as the spy master, and also the sort of the religious aspect of his character. And that really really worked. Also, we have to go back to Daniel Craig's outfit. That was just great. The whole scene, I felt like, with him and John Gielgud, you kind of get a sense of a different part of the world. The way that the lighting is there, and you don't really see a whole lot of the Pope's chambers. But you get a sense of, Gielgud, you get a lot of red and you get a lot of black. Those are kinds of things that really kind of work, considering they're both involved in murder. So both of the use of color there, I thought that was really good with the props and the design. Just everything comes together really well. And then, of course, you just have like a lot of the elaborate stuff, like, the entertainers coming in, dressed like Spanish ships, pirating, doing pirate raids on Spanish galleons. I'm just like, oh man, that right, is in your face. That is
right
awesome.
in front of the Spanish ambassador, by the way.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and the way that James Frain plays that is so good too.
I will also say,
so unhappy.
Yeah.
I have to say that they pulled off, to me, I don't know if it was deliberate, but to me, the comical sense of some of the men's fashions at this time. Like when Dudley comes out and he's wearing the socks, and then suddenly his pants balloon out to be like 8,000 feet out to either side. And I'm just kind of like, dude, why in the world are you wearing those pants? But
Vincent Castle's dress too.
Right. Yeah. Fashion was a gigantic thing, and studying that kind of fashion, it's just like how impractical it is. It's pure vanity. There is no practicality to any of it. And that's what makes it so much fun. Yeah. So, I got to hand it to them for that. That's fun.
You're dealing with a bunch of elites, in the halls of power. So, all you see are the glamour and the glitz and all of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's fun to look back at too, and just look at it and go, oh my God, you look ridiculous, and
they got to pull it off. And I'd love to be there to say, this is your costume, and understand you're a badass. So own it.
Yeah, but I don't want to be a pirate, So Seinfeld moment there. So definitely, I also want to real quick. So this is the last thing, and we're going to wrap up here. So there was that moment with the assassination scene. I think one of the most effective moments of that scene, though, and I think this was a deliberate director's choice, was to show everybody on the various boats just watching Elizabeth and the various actors' scenes, and as they just calmly stare at her as people are attempting to murder her. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that scene in particular and how that was shot and portrayed, and then we'll get out of here. So I'm going to go to Lance first.
Well, I thought it was directly cold. It was like business as usual. If it happens, it happens. Then they'll go back to their place and drink. I felt it was all played awesomely, deliberately cold. And I liked that aspect of it. And I liked the blocking of the shots. I liked the eye line. I liked how it was laid out, but it's so fast. It's just that, like you said, that's the only action sequence in the movie. It's all pretty much melodrama. But other than that, I thought that was staged extremely well. And of course, a lot of the long shots and stuff are on water. And then, of course, for all we know, the boats are parked and they're doing their scenes on the water, possibly. But, that's very difficult stuff to do. I wouldn't have done it on water. I probably would have done it in a studio. I'm like, no, we're not going to be out on water. That's not happening. But it's a ballsy thing to do, and it played out very well. I like that.
Awesome. I will also say, I'm going to go to Steve. I'm going to see what he has to say about this from a writing perspective and a story perspective. And Elizabeth's arc, I think that this is the turning point for her character to transform into something else. This particular moment. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. It's for real now. It's for real. It's on.
Yeah. What do you think,
Yeah.
Steve?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is definitely a catalyst because you start to see that she starts to be motivated more by I can't trust anybody, because before she's more innocent, she's more willing to practice forgiveness, and oh, we're going to try to see if Catholicism and Protestantism can get along, and all of that. And she just, after that, she's just like, I don't care anymore. Let's just kill them all. And understandably so. I mean, they just tried to murder her a couple of times, and she just got taken out with a crossbow. Later on, she there was a dress that was meant for her that killed one of her ladies in waiting. At that point, I think she's just like, no, go ahead and do it. But yeah, this is part of the catalyst, and I think also there's sort of a sense right before that. You start to see the fireworks going off on the water. And I think that this is part of the reason why they filmed it this way on the water. If you look at it a certain way, you start to see it like almost like London is burning. And I'm starting to see that is what Elizabeth is seeing, instead of, all the celebration. She is seeing what will happen to her country if she fails. And I kind of dig that there is a way that you can see that scene both ways. And I think, that's also part of the catalyst. You start to realize that I have to do this for my people. I have to separate myself from men, from love, from everything for my people. And that's kind of where she's going with that. That's her.
I think what you nailed too is the aspect of that catalyst, but also there's that point where she's taunting about being married. Having a Spaniard marry them right then and there, so she's kind of.
She was playing. In real life, she was playing very calculated political games with marriage, and she never committed to any of them. But she always used it as a diplomatic tool. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
I will have to real quick as we're going to wrap this up. I have to say, man, it would have sucked to be her lady in waiting when she was jailed. The fact that they put her ladies in there with her in the cells, like, what the hell did we do? So I was like,
I know it's one of those things of, hey, you're part of the crew. You still got a cleaner. You still got to brush your hair. You still got to do all the silliness.
Yeah, but like the hell with that. I'm out of here. I mean, I guess it's okay, but I don't know. It's like, why the hell am I in the Tower of London? And she was actually in there for a year in real life. I mean, can you imagine you're going to live in the Tower of London for a year because she's getting jailed? I've been like,
well, I often wondered, they probably weren't served the gruel like everybody else. You know what I mean? The ladies in waiting probably still had it better rather than being out on the street in London. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's definitely a sense that she kind of realizes it's either me or them in the tower, and I would rather it be them.
Yeah. I guess at least you had a job. So,
Right. There's hard times, man. Hard times.
Very Game of Thrones, but it works.
So with that, we are going to wrap up this edition of Cinema Crusaders talking about Elizabeth. Real quick before we wrap it up, Lance is next up picking our next movie. He's going to pick a movie based on an actor or actresses in this movie. Have you decided yet, or?
I was torn. I was going to go with Attenborough so I can really go back. I was going to do the Sand Pebbles, and that can branch out with a Steve McQueen, a Mako, Candice Bergen. But what's been spinning in my head is Joseph Fiennes and Enemy at the Gates.
Ooh, right. I love that movie.
And that can spider out with an Ed Harris. There's a Rachel Weisz. A Jude Law, and even a Bob Hoskins. So you can spider out from there, and it's a great Jean-Jacques Annaud period piece. The guy, he's a black and white in color. He's Quest for Fire. He's The Lover. This cat is one of my favorite directors. So
that's a great movie to talk about. I love that movie. So
yeah, I think it's going to be Enemy at the Gates, and I think it was 2001. 2001, I'll bet on it. 2001 Enemy at the Gates is my pick, and it's because of the springboard is Joseph Fiennes, and then we'll take it from there with these other great performers.
Awesome. So we'll be doing that next Friday. I do want to announce we're probably going to go about a little bit later, about half hour later, because we have Anyone Con on Thursday and Friday. So I will be done with that until the time we normally start. So I need a time to go pee and, collect myself, and then we can come back on for that show. So we'll be going probably about 4:30 next week, but we'll be doing Enemy at the Gates with Joseph Fiennes and Ed Harris, and like you said, all great cast. And as a war movie enthusiast, I love that movie. So I can't wait to have you hear your breakdowns on everything else that goes with it too. So
cool.
All right. So I want to give a great thank you to Steve. Thank you so much for talking about this movie with me.
Yeah, it's been good to go back and revisit this. I had seen this a long time ago, and I had forgotten so much, and now I kind of remember why I kind of like this one to begin with. And yeah, it's definitely one worth going back towards. And while Golden Age is not as good, I would say at least watch that just to kind of get a sense of how our reign ends. Sports scene alone.
It's not a bad movie. I just don't think it's as good as this one. So
yeah, I don't either.
Much the same cast, same director, and everything. So
yeah,
but thank you so much, Lance, for being here, and I'm glad I got to introduce this movie to you. It's always fun when
this one just I don't know, it fell off the radar for me for some reason. So it was nice to check out something new, something old new.
Yeah, very cool.
Something blue. Oh wait, that's Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah.
And that's what this show is all about. I mean, a lot of times we're talking about movies we've already seen, but we're hoping if you haven't seen this movie, listen to what we had to say, and then go check it out and make up your own mind.
Yep. And thank you very much, studios. We're endorsing your movies.
Somebody has to because their actors aren't.
Yeah.
So thank you, all of you out there. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Cinema Crusaders. Remember, keep that popcorn warm. Keep those cozy chairs cozy. Watch some movies this weekend, perhaps even Elizabeth. And we will see you next week at a similar time.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, it's going to be a weird Friday.
Yeah, on Cinema Crusaders. We'll see you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yep. All right, see ya.